discerning reflections and thoughts of the heart. Alleluia, 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 alleluia.
The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew. The Pharisees went off and plotted how they might entrap Jesus in speech. They sent their disciples to him with the Herodians, saying, "Teacher, we know that you are a truthful man, and that you teach the way of God in accordance with the truth, and you are not concerned with anyone's opinions, for you do not regard a person's status. Tell us then, what is your opinion? Is it lawful to pay the census tax to Caesar or not?" Knowing their malice, Jesus said, "Why are you testing me, you hypocrites? Show me the coin that pays the census tax." Then they handed him the Roman coin. He said to them, "Whose image is this and whose inscription?" They replied, "Caesar's." And he said to them, "Then repay to Caesar what belongs to Caesar, and to God what belongs to God." The Gospel of the Lord. My first meeting with community organizers was memorable. A group of Catholic pastors in Bed-Stuy recognized that many of our parishioners were being displaced by real estate predators, and we wanted to combat this. When I entered the meeting room, the lead organizer, who has since become a mentor and friend, looked at me and said, "Here comes the problem." Me? He doesn't even know me. I was taken aback, to say the least, but he explained that he did not mean this personally, but that I was of the 60s generation, which tends to be anti-institutional. He told us immediately that we would help our parishioners keep their homes only by using and strengthening institutions. And if we were not prepared to do this, then our time could be better spent helping them move their furniture onto the street. Today's gospel and Pope Francis's new encyclical, Fratelli Tutti, have shown me again the wisdom of these words. First, the gospel. Jesus is being set up, and he knows it. Taxes are always a vexing question, and even more so in an occupied territory, where they are paid to the oppressor. If Jesus does not pay them, he could be arrested. If he says pay them, he will be seen as a collaborator. We admire the shrewdness by which he avoids the trap, but isn't he stating, at very least, a misconception? Doesn't everything belong to God? The answer, of course, is yes. But God expects us to live together and thus encourages institutions which promote security and the equitable distribution of goods. This will vary from age to age, but it is a necessary part of human living, even something as flawed as the Roman Empire. Pope Francis reminds us of this in his encyclical. Every person in society must seek the common good, but that can be attained in many ways by many systems of thought. There are many roads to the same end. Yet he is very clear that all will require the development and sustenance of strong institutions. These extend from the family through voluntary organizations like churches and local societies, including community organizing groups, to the entire range of civil and governmental agencies. And this is organized by politics. Now, Francis is quite aware that politics, for most of us, is distasteful and acknowledges the corruption and inefficiency of many politicians. Yet he is insistent that, and I quote, "Politics is a lofty vocation and one of the highest forms of charity, in so much as it seeks the common good." We need to take common good rather literally. There are some people who believe that politics exists only to enhance the economy. Indeed, for some, a country can be judged by its gross national product alone. This is certainly part of any successful society, but the economy must serve the common good. Vast inequalities of income and wealth inevitably weaken a community. If a sizable portion of the population realizes that no matter how hard they work, they will never really be able to change their situation, while others have few impediments before them, it is difficult to develop meaningful and healthy patriotism. This is usually compounded with the reality that while some people live like kings, others scrounge in garbage cans for food. Massive inequality has teeth. Politics for Francis is the art and science through which our neighbor does not find himself in poverty. I love that line, so I'm going to say it again. Politics is the art and science which our neighbor does not find himself in poverty. Sometimes this can be handled by a family, sometimes by a church, but it usually requires a more robust civil component. Francis writes, "Private life cannot exist unless it is protected by public order. A domestic hearth has no real warmth unless it is safeguarded by law." This quote continues for a while. Pope Francis, like Pope Benedict, thinks in paragraphs, and is included with some excerpts from Frascetti Tutti on the parish website. They are well worth reading, although we as a parish will examine it probably in the book club in a couple of weeks. This is all a matter of love. And he gives a wonderful example of two kinds of love. He expresses it so well and with such warmth that I will quote it in full. It is an act of charity to assist someone suffering, but it is also an act of charity, even if we do not know that person, to work to change the social conditions that caused his or her suffering. If someone helps an elderly person cross a river, that is a fine act of charity. The politician, on the other hand, builds a bridge, and that too is an act of charity. While one person can help another by providing something to eat, the politician creates a job for that other person and thus practices a lofty form of charity and ennobles his or her political activity. Now note that Francis clearly identifies the person who pulls this all together as the politician. He reminds us that the politician will be successful only to the extent that he or she is motivated by love. Francis is in no way naive in this matter. Remember, he comes from Argentina during the time first of the Dirty War and then the financial collapse. His comments on practical politics can be disturbingly realistic. But the last section of the paragraph that I provide on the website is particularly poignant, and I ask you to read it before any of us vote this year. Francis sees the politician, admittedly used very broadly, as the person who is responsible for coordinating all the elements that go into a successful country. There will always be the temptation to mechanically apply the principles of one's favorite ideology to the world without thought and without love. His Holiness is particularly concerned about this, as it puts human beings of flesh and blood in the straitjacket of mere thoughts and ideas. A politician is called to apply his or her whole being to real life. He calls this political love, difficult to obtain and more difficult to maintain. Yet do we pray for them? And do we pray that people will take up politics as more than a potentially lucrative career? Now, my own experience of this is rather personal. During my mother's last illness, we would pray together, and I, loyal priest that I am, would always include a prayer for priestly vocations. Mother would dutifully go along with it. But then she would add a prayer for vocations to the political life. She would add a prayer that young people, and she had a whole list that she thought should do it, should take up politics. This was amazing because she was usually, at best, disrespectful of authority. My mother's motto was, if it's big, hit it. If it's really big, hit it really hard. Little old Irish lady, about that big, looked as if she came out of central casting, and I was convinced she was. I think at the end of her long life, she died at 93, and a good deal of it spent causing trouble. More politicians came to her wake, and I was convinced, just to be certain, she was dead. She knew what was, hey, you think I have an angular personality? Ha ha ha. She knew what was lacking in the society and knew what was needed to build it up. Young people willing to participate in the give and take of civil life, but with a firm moral compass. We are all now Caesar, with the power to determine who will act for us. Can we raise up leaders who will show political love and give more back to God than they received from us?